And this is a Fox News alert. Welcome to Hannity tonight, and we are live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a city that is on edge after 2 nights of violent protests. Now, agitators burned buildings, damaged police cars, resulting in injured officers and over a dozen arrests. Now, this all comes after a 23-year-old African-American man was shot and killed by an African-American cop over the weekend. Now, listen to what the sister of this man said.
Sue his mama, y'all sorry for her loss. Burning down don't help nothing. Y'all burning down we need in our community. Take that suburbs. Burn that we need our.
And that's not all. Protesters can also be heard on tape saying that white people are being attacked and to kick their white ass. Listen to this.
They not playing. Man, no white person come down Sherman. He white. Beat it. Hey, look. White boy. They beating up every white person. They beating up every white person. They jumping every white person. Who they beating up? Who they beating up? Who they chasing?
My friend Sheriff David Clarke will join us right here in Milwaukee in just a few minutes. But first, earlier today in Ohio, the 2016 GOP nominee unveiled his strategy to defeat ISIS and radical Islam, and he actually said the words. Here are some of the highlights.
A new immigration policy is needed immediately. We should only admit into this country those who share our values and respect our people. In the Cold War, we had an ideological screening test. The time is overdue to develop a new screening test for the threats we face today. I call it extreme vetting. One of my first acts as president will be to establish a commission on radical Islam, which will include reformist voices in the Muslim community who will hopefully work with us. We want to build bridges and erase divisions. The goal of the commission will be to identify and explain to the American public the core convictions and beliefs of radical Islam, to identify the warning signs of radicalization, and to expose the networks in our society that support radicalization. We will also keep open Guantanamo Bay and place a renewed emphasis on human intelligence.
And a quick programming note, tomorrow night, Donald Trump will join us right here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin for a town hall on that very topic. But first, joining us now with reaction is former Speaker of the House, Fox News contributor Newt Gingrich. Mr. Speaker, before we get to Donald Trump's speech, which I think really puts out their profound differences between how he would deal with ISIS and radical Islam versus Hillary and Obama, I've got to ask you about this situation in Milwaukee. We just played the tape. You have people saying burn down the white suburbs, and somebody else asking, are they white? Yeah, they're white. Yeah, they're white. Okay, get their ass. Hey, they're beating every white person. He's white. Beat his head. B word. And it goes on, and you've seen the violence, and you've seen the video. What is your reaction to this?
Well, first, this is the tragic culmination of 8 years of total failure by President Barack Obama, who has routinely attacked the police, rendered judgment when he didn't know anything about what was going on, and has increased the sense of racial hostility. Gallup reports that we now have the greatest tension that we've had in 16 years between the races. This is a tragedy to have an African-American president fail this totally. Second, remember that there were 9 people shot and 5 killed in Milwaukee in the 48 hours before this happened. But because they were just shot and killed without a policeman involved, for some reason Black Lives Matter didn't think Black Lives mattered as long as no policeman is involved. And remember, you have an African-American policeman dealing with somebody who'd already been arrested 13 different times. The gun that the person was carrying turned out to have been stolen in a burglary. And the video shows clearly that that man was aiming the gun at the policeman. Now, in a period when folks have declared war on cops, I don't think you can expect cops to wait to get shot. So My specific advice is, let's start setting up cameras so that every time you have a riot like this, we film every person involved, and in the next 3 or 4 days, we go out and pick them up. And so they get 60, 90, 120 days.
We had video of Ferguson. We had video of Baltimore.
Right.
We had those people on video. They never followed up. They never arrested those people.
That's
so
because
to me,
if
it's
you're
like a get-out-of-jail-free card. You're free to go and continue that behavior.
That's because the lesson of liberalism is don't lock anybody else up, even if you have 3,500 dead in Chicago. 99 people shot in Chicago last week. 24 died. But under liberalism, you yell about guns and do nothing about criminals, and everything gets worse. We've had a 20% increase in violent crime in the major cities in the last year because the Obama policies are all coming home to roost, and they're all anti-police and pro-criminal. And it's going to get worse before it gets better.
I have actually taken time on this television show, Mr. Speaker, and we have scrolled the names of those 3,500 people. Most of America never heard their names before. But if it's a high-profile racial case, if it's Cambridge, the president rushes to judgment, no due process, no presumption of innocence. The same thing in Ferguson, the same thing in Baltimore, the same thing with George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin. I would think in his own home city he'd care that 3,500 of his fellow Chicago citizens are dead since the time he's been president, but apparently not.
Well, and remember, it's Hillary Clinton's birthplace. So you have the current president and their candidate for president, both from Chicago, and they seem to be totally coldly indifferent to the deaths of their fellow Americans. I mean, it's truly a tragic thing. And by the way, Sheriff Clarke has been magnificent in the last 2 or 3 days. I'm so glad you're having him on tonight because he is such, in my mind, he is a genuine American hero who's had the courage to tell the truth and to do his job.
And he's a great leader.
To stand up to special interests.
All right, let me go to Donald Trump's speech for a minute. I actually think that today's speech was probably the best speech he has given since he has been a candidate, and I want to tell you why. He identified, first of all, he wasn't talking about the New York Times, wasn't talking about the mayor of Baltimore or any other people. His focus was on 2 people, which I think should be the focus in this campaign, Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. He laid out a list of one terror example after another, one bad policy failure after another, one broken part of the world after another because of what they have done. And then he laid out a solution-based program on how he would do things differently, from immigration to vetting refugees to security to identifying radical Islam and on and on. To me, that seems to be the paradigm that he ought to take for the rest of the campaign on every issue. Forget everybody else, identify the problem and the mistakes, and offer solutions.
Well, I agree with you about that for the campaign, but I don't want to just jump past this speech. For the first time in the 37 years since the Iranians illegally seized American hostages, in the 15 years since al-Qaeda killed Americans on 9/11, for the very first time, you've had a president of the United States get up and tell the truth, that there is a system of radical Islamism.
A candidate, yeah.
And he did just a remarkable job, in my judgment, of identifying the enemy, describing accurately how big the problem is. And this, in some ways, is the most important foreign policy speech since Ronald Reagan, in that it really does set the stage for a debate for the American people about what's threatening us, what should we do about it. And I think the contrast between what he did, what Donald Trump did, and where Hillary Clinton is, couldn't be clearer. This is a Grand Canyon-wide chasm of 2 totally different worldviews.
You know, you think about it, I mean, this is the JV team, as Barack Obama said. Hillary started the negotiations with the Iranians and Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. They got $150 billion, then they got $400 million for hostages as a ransom payment. We don't have a strategy yet, the president once said. He said they're contained. He said ISIS does not pose an existential threat to us, which is wrong, too. We don't have that strategy quite yet. And he goes on and on. He's been wrong every step of the way, Mr. Speaker, on every...
I mean, you're right. He's been wrong and Hillary's been wrong. But I want to go back to Donald Trump just for a second. All of his critics have said, give us a clear roadmap of where you would go. Now he took what may be the most important national security threat of the next decade. He outlined what the threat is. He outlined why we have failed. He outlined how important it is. And he began to lay the base for a very serious, very dramatic change. And this was truly a historic speech. And it'll be interesting to see if the mainstream media can actually focus on the speech and can actually talk about the difference between the confusion of the Obama-Clinton model and the clarity of the Trump model.
Well, I wouldn't hold your breath for that, because the biggest contributors to Hillary Clinton's campaign clearly are the media. And I would even argue that some of the Republicans that lost, that are crybabies, that have picked up their toys, that would prefer Hillary pick the Supreme Court justices. But I want to ask you one question, a strategic question in terms of the campaign. If Donald Trump approached every issue that we are facing today in terms of the economy, he gave a speech on the economy recently, if he approached immigration this way, if he approached Obamacare this way, if he approached the need for energy independence, if he approached all of these big important issues that we're now facing, Supreme Court justices, and he were to follow the same model of today, lay out the problem, the mistakes that have been made, offer a new direction, and keep his focus, wouldn't that be a winning formula?
Well, I saw one study that said if he did that, the political scientist who said the odds are that he would win by 65 or 66% because of the underlying patterns that we're faced with, which would just shock the whole system. But let's take where you are tonight. And I'm really delighted that you're in Milwaukee, because it's very important. I hope, and I know he's going to be with you tomorrow night, I hope he's going to talk a little bit tomorrow night about the inner city, but I hope in the next few days you're going to see him be honest, as Sheriff Clarke is. Failure in schools with the teacher union as a major enemy of children. Failure in city bureaucracies, which kill jobs with regulation. Failure among local politicians who pander to the criminals and fail to stand up for the law enforcement agencies. Failures to create a job-friendly environment. Failures to find new strategies in welfare to encourage families to stay together rather than being broken up. Sheriff Clarke understands all this even better than I do. I hope that Trump is going to have the courage, and Mike Pence with him, to get right in the middle of the left's zone, take them head on, understand the left-wing politicians will all go crazy, but they're the people who failed. Tomorrow. They're absolutely the people who have failed.
And you know, I'll give these statistics to Sheriff Clarke in a minute, but they have failed. And most of the cities that are struggling so badly right now have been run by Democrats for decades. And under Obama, there's a 58% increase in African Americans that are now on food stamps, a 20% increase in Black Americans that are not participating in the labor force. I'll get into that with Sheriff Clarke. Mr. Speaker, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Now we have a quick program. You know, we are in the Badger State. We're ahead of our town hall with Donald Trump. It'll be right here tomorrow night. If you live in and around the Milwaukee area, you want to be a part of the show tomorrow night. By the way, Governor Scott Walker will be here. Sheriff Clarke will be here. Just go to Hannity.com, my website. Find out all the details. You don't want to miss it. And coming up on Saturday, right here in this city, violent protests erupted after an African-American police officer killed a 23-year-old African-American man who reportedly had a gun in his hand. Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clarke joins us live to talk about the state of his city, that and more, as we continue from Milwaukee. And welcome back to Hannity. Now, the city of Milwaukee is on edge following 2 nights of destructive protests where agitators burned buildings, damaged police cars, pelted police with rocks and bottles and other things, resulting in injured officers and over a dozen arrests. Now, this comes after a 23-year-old man was shot and killed by a police officer, and that, of course, he was carrying a gun and has a long rap sheet. Now, the city's police chief said the suspect was shot after turning towards the officer with a gun in his hand while attempting to flee from a traffic stop. Here with reaction is Milwaukee County Sheriff, our friend David Clarke. Sheriff, how are you? I'm sorry about when I witnessed this in any city. I'm sorry to see that anywhere.
Thanks. This is my hometown, so it hurts a little more, but welcome to Milwaukee.
Yeah, it's great to be back. All right, let me play some of the tape. I mean, we've gone through this in great detail, some of the things that are said. Let's roll tape.
So is Mama y'all sorry for her loss? Burning down don't help nothing. Don't burn it down. We need in our community. Take that suburb. Burn that. We need our
He white. Beat it. Hey, look. White boy. They beating up every white person. They beating up every white person. They jumping every white person. Who they beating up? Who they beating up? Who they chasing?
When the people start setting on fire, that's because they feel like they can't do anything else. That's what that means. It comes from helplessness, and they put us in office to help. We haven't been doing enough. Everybody is playing politics, and nobody is playing life. Our people are living and dying on the streets.
Sheriff, let me turn to you. 4 of your officers got hurt last night.
Rocks were flying not too long after the crowd started to move. I authorized tonight a higher use of force. We're going to do this reasonably and by the Constitution, but I've authorized the use of some non-lethal stuff to disperse the crowd if that happens again.
Let's talk a little bit about what you just heard there about getting the white person and picking out he's white. Let's get him. Let's beat his ass and all this nonsense.
Look, Saturday night the social order collapsed in Milwaukee. That leads to tribal behavior. That leads to the law of the jungle replacing the rule of law. And that kind of behavior, the quote we just heard, is part of that. It's shameful, I think, at the time. It's culturally dysfunctional black underclass behavior. We've had the growth of the underclass here in Milwaukee. Milwaukee could be a case study. This didn't happen overnight. Several decades, 3, 4, 5 decades of progressive liberal Democrat political rule here that has created the expansion of the welfare class, the expansion of state of dependency. We lead in these economic indicators. We lead in poverty rates, 6th poorest city in America. School failure, Milwaukee Public Schools, K-12, one of the worst performing in terms of math reading scores, graduation rates, attendance rates. Black male unemployment in the city of Milwaukee, 32%. 70% of kids born out of wedlock. You have questionable lifestyle choices. Those are self-inflicted pathologies. Those are encouraged by the welfare state. This thing was created. Sean and I grew up in the city. It was never like this. This was always a working class, blue-collar middle class. The middle class has fled, and now what you have is the government.
Let's talk about the correlation here, because I think this is really important. And, I give out economic statistics every day because under this president, not only did we double the debt, but we have 12 more million Americans on food stamps since Obama's been president, 8 million more in poverty, the lowest labor participation rate since the 70s, the worst recovery since the 40s. We have the lowest home ownership rate in 51 years. You have 1 in 5 American families, not a single member of that family is working. 1 in 6 American males, 18 to 34. Prime working age, are either incarcerated or they are out of work living in mommy and daddy's basement, and we pay more money per capita per student and 35th in terms of education in the industrialized world.
Well, you know as well as I do that these progressive Democrat urban policies create an underclass. All right, they create by design. This is by design for ultimately political power. Just always keep that in mind.
In other words, it's creating dependency and failure, so they need to elect. They get the power by creating dependency, so people keep them in power?
It helps them maintain power. This is cruel. Look, the black community has been exploited ever since Lyndon Johnson's war on poverty. Okay? They marginalized the black man, removed him, told him he was expendable, said Uncle Sam's going to be the dad, Uncle Sam is going to raise the kids. Uncle Sam is a horrible father, and we're seeing the results of that. We know that young men in the black community growing up without a father to shape their behavior, more times than not always, more times than not, grows up to be an unmanageable misfit that the police have to deal with in aggressive fashion like we saw Saturday night. So, the alderman, the quote that we were listening to, he talks about oppression. And you know what the only remnant of oppression for black people is left in America? The Democrat Party.
Let me ask you this, because in this particular case, it just happened to be a black officer. And you have a guy with a rap sheet a mile long, a guy from heroin, cocaine, weapons, all of these charges in his past. He has a gun. 23 bullets apparently in the clip. I don't know how you get 23 in one
extended clip.
Extended clip. Okay, so you got 23 bullets. I'm told, you know, the story they first came out. Oh, they shot him in the back, just like Michael Brown. Turns out they didn't shoot him in the back. The officer shot him in the front, which means that gun was probably pointed at the officer.
Well, not only that, but the gun was stolen. And the investigation, you know, in time, we'll tell what happened. But here's the thing: it doesn't matter that the officer was black.
But
would it
have made a difference in the mind? Would it have made a difference in the mind of the president, who rushed to judgment in Florida and Baltimore and Ferguson and Cambridge?
He's probably stumped on this one. Somehow they try to turn this into an issue about guns, the NRA and gun control. None of that is here, so he keeps his mouth shut. But look, there's a way out of this, but we're going to have to continue to push back. It's what I've been doing with your platform, and I appreciate that, to push back against these destructive, progressive policies that have hit the black community like a nuclear
blast. All right, last question. Now there's a 58% increase since Obama's been president of black Americans on food stamps, a 20% increase in black Americans not participating in the labor force. So Obama's liberalism has failed. America's first black president has not helped black America. But yet 90%, if you read the polls, of black Americans keep voting Democratic. Why?
Well, it's that exploitation, okay? They use they set this thing up, and then they use this boogeyman, this boogeyman of racism. You know how this works. At election time, they come in, happens in Milwaukee, right?
Race card is played every election.
If you vote Republican, they're going to take your food assistance or your rent assistance away, your heat assistance away.
Kill Granny.
People who have, and the people who can't drill down into some of this stuff to figure out for themselves, that are susceptible to the propaganda, that's a scary thought. I kind of get that. But that's why we need a plurality of voices in this community. I provide it with the help of talk radio here. And we just need a plurality of voice. And you have to keep, you know how this works. You have to
keep
control the narrative, keep beating the narrative over and over and over again. Over time, this community, the black community, my community, they're going to open their eyes. And when they do, I'll tell you what, they're not going to like what they see.
Sheriff, your city's in our press. Really mean that. You're going to be here tomorrow night with Mr. Trump, and at our town hall, Governor Walker will be here. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
I'll be here.
All right. Thank you, Sheriff. Appreciate it. And coming up, we have more reaction to the violent protests erupting right here in the city of Milwaukee. Our panel weighs in, and also later tonight.
Anyone who cannot condemn the hatred, oppression, and violence of radical Islam lacks the moral clarity to serve as our president.
A big speech by Donald Trump today laying out his plan to destroy ISIS, defeat radical Islam. Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North will weigh in. That's coming up later as we continue tonight from Milwaukee. Welcome back to Hannity. Now, authorities here in Milwaukee, they're trying to calm tensions in the city after 2 nights of riots. Here with reaction, Salem radio nationally syndicated talk show host Larry Elder, also radio talk show host James Harris, and civil rights attorney. He worked in Ferguson and in the Trayvon Martin case. Daryl Parks is with us. Larry, let me start with you and get your reaction. You heard what I heard. You witnessed what I witnessed. You see what's going on. Your reaction?
My reaction is I hope somehow we can figure out a way of cloning Sheriff David Clarke. I once interviewed Koese Mfume when he was the head of the NAACP, and I said, Mr. Mfume, as between the presence of white racism or the absence of black fathers, which poses a bigger threat to the black community? Without missing a beat, he said the absence of black fathers. When I was in college, we read a book called The Negro Family, A Case for National Action, written by Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who later on became a Democratic senator for New York. At the time, 25% of black kids were born outside of wedlock. 50 years later, trillions of dollars spent on the so-called war on poverty. That percentage is now 73%. And it was Obama who said a kid raised without a dad is 5 times more likely to be poor, 20 times more likely to end up in jail. We need to rethink the welfare state because, as Sheriff Clarke pointed out, what the welfare state has done is to incentivize women into marrying the government and allowed men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility. Wow.
That's profound, and that's really deep, and on a certain level, everything you're saying is true. Daryl, I've known you for a long time. We're very friendly. You've been on the wrong side of a lot of these issues as far as I'm concerned, especially in Ferguson, especially with Trayvon Martin. And so I ask you, Daryl, when you see this talking about killing white people, I know you. You don't agree with this.
Without question. Sean, let me say, we have to be careful. The person that you saw in the news earlier today, that person does not speak for the community. What we see in Milwaukee, from what I've seen over the last 2 days, is a community that's crying out, we need help in many ways. So I'm hoping that the leaders in Milwaukee...
Stop, Daryl. That's not true. They're crying out, kill the white person. Oh, if he's white, beat his ass.
Sean,
that's what they're
true.
crying out. They're not crying out for help. I have the tape, Daryl. We just played it.
That was one person, Sean. There are many other people.
No,
did you hear that city councilman who was talking about the problem that's going on? Well, there are other people who are trying to help.
Involved in actually engaging in this behavior.
Well, I think it's a leadership void. Obviously, there's leadership that's failing. Maybe people like that sheriff needs to go and figure out what's the problem.
You're right.
Yes.
Are you going to say that Barack Obama, black Americans under Barack Obama, food stamp participation has gone up 58%? Black Americans out of the labor force up 20% under Barack Obama? Inner city schools are a disaster.
Don't make it a political issue.
What did Obama do to fix them?
It's a social issue. It's a social issue that needs to be addressed.
What's your take on this?
That needs to be addressed.
James?
Yes, sir.
What's your take on all this?
You know what? I am from the Sherman Park area. I moved into the Sherman Park area because of the strong families that were there. I raised 2 boys and my daughter in that area. I'm listening to all the statistics and I'm listening to all of the excuses, but the reality is that there are very strong families in that area, and they are adversely affected by the politics of the situation.
By the way, you're totally right. The overwhelming 99% of people that live there are, I'm sure, appalled by this and did not participate, but it is happening in their neighborhood, and I'm sure they don't want it there.
Listen, we used to live there. It's the most beautiful. Sherman Park is a beautiful area. It's the most multicultural area of Milwaukee. Raised my kids there. We called it the urban Mayberry. However, you shouldn't walk your dog at night. There's some things you could not do. And when violence like this erupts, like it did 5 years ago when I was there.
That's not Mayberry. Yeah, you can't walk your dog at night. That ain't Mayberry.
Listen, I mean, Mayberry in that the neighbors knew each other and they cared for each other and they watched out for each other. Yep. But you're right in that the dark underbelly of this is that you've had decades of dependency that has created a culture of violence that does not believe in rule of law, that does not have the same values that the rest of the people share, and it erupts from time to time like it did last weekend.
And Democratic policies have failed black Americans. I know Larry is very passionate about this and talked about it for years. Larry, we'll get to you when we get back. And also when we come back, we'll get our panel to react to this, by the way. I'll debate a man who says that the rioting and the looting is a demand for justice, and also tonight.
Anyone who cannot condemn the hatred, oppression, and violence of radical Islam lacks the moral clarity to serve as our president.
Donald Trump laying out his plan to defeat ISIS and radical Islam. He actually said the words, radical Islam. What a refreshing change. Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North has reaction later on. And welcome back to Hannity. Milwaukee is now trying to get to the peace following 2 nights of violence. Unfortunately, now some are saying what they're seeing in the city is the result of decades of racial tensions now boiling over. Joining us now, the co-founder of the Coalition for Justice. His name is Nate Hamilton. Nate, thank you. You know, you heard the calls for beating up white people and, oh, they're white, let's get them and let's beat their ass. You heard all of that on the tapes. I also understand you're a supporter of the Black Lives Matter group. Is that true?
I don't know who the Black Lives Matter group is.
You know what Black Lives Matter is. Let's not be cute. You know what Black Lives. You know what I know is I know Black Lives Matter is a name. It's a name that everyone uses now. So it's a name and it's a group, and there are members of this group, and you have been supportive of them. And as a matter of fact, your group, the Coalition for Justice, you protested with Black Lives Matter. Well, we've got this one guy that keeps going to the White House and visiting the president.
We protested with Coalition for Justice. We protested with Coalition for Justice.
And what are your thoughts on last night? What do you think when you hear people saying, oh, they're white, let's get them, let's beat their ass? Do you like that?
You know, I think people have misplaced aggression. There's a systematic oppression, and the aggression, it's in the wrong place. And they have to put that aggression somewhere else into getting things done. New policies,
and where should they put the aggression?
More trainings, more trainings. They need to put it where the people who can change it. Our elected officials need to do more. Our governor needs to do more. There's a substantial amount of people in the black community that are doing good.
We've had the first black president in the history of the United States, and 58% increase in black Americans on food stamps. We have 20% increase of black Americans out of the labor force since Obama's been president. Has Barack Obama been good for black America? Has his policies, his liberal, leftist, statist policies been good for black America?
Is Barack Obama the only one that can bring jobs to this city? No. It doesn't just deal with
But he's the
Barack
president
Obama.
and things have...
It deals with...
But answer the question. Have things gotten better for black Americans under Barack Obama? This is because I'm asking because
things haven't
if you look
been better.
demographically, black Americans
It's not
tend
just
to vote
Barack
Democratic.
Obama. It's George Bush. It's Bill Clinton. It's Reagan.
George Bush has been
Black
out of
people have
office
been
8 years,
suffering
Nate.
for decades.
Wake up.
Yeah, but people been suffering for years. It's just not Barack Obama. We were suffering a long time before he came here, and he had to deal with a problem and getting things better. No, it's not more government. It's not more police officers. It's more resources for a community that is suffering right now. They're hanging a piece of bacon over the black community's head, and they say, who's going to be the first one to go get it? How are you going to get it? Yeah, more funding will get it. More businesses will get it. More entrepreneurship will get it. More financial literacy training will get it. But we're not getting these things in our community right now. So that's what we're fighting for with the Coalition for Justice, for more community development, more programming, more things that's going to be substantial in building a community.
I appreciate you being with us. And as Sheriff Clarke pointed out, you know what? Look at the city, #1 and #6 in poverty nationwide. You look at Baltimore, the poverty. Look at Ferguson. All these cities that we keep talking about, sadly, have been democratically run for years. I think the policies of leftism, statism, progressivism, socialism, redistribution, spreading the wealth has not helped anybody from the Great Society on. I appreciate you being with us. We continue now with Larry Elders. Larry Elders with us, James Harris, and Darryl Parks. Larry, what's your reaction to all of this? Is it more government, more distribution of resources? Is that the answer?
No, of course not. We're spending a great deal of money K through 12. In fact, America spends more money K through 12, I think, than any other industrialized country on the face of the earth. It's not about that. It's about, as I said before, it's about morals, it's about values, it's about men living up to their obligations. Barack Obama wrote a book called Dreams from My Father about the angst that he experienced because I think he met his biological father one time. He even lied to children about what his father did because he felt so bad about that. Jesse Jackson's mom was a teenage mom who got pregnant by the married man who lived next door. And when Jackson was growing up in South Carolina, kids taunted him, Jesse ain't got no daddy, Jesse ain't got no daddy. Al Sharpton lived a nice, comfortable middle-class life until his father abandoned the family and then down to the ghetto. And these are three of our most prominent so-called black leaders, and they ought to be talking about the difficulty when you don't have a dad and that men should live up to their moral responsibilities. Finally, the one so-called leader, Farrakhan, had a march called the Million Man March where he talked about what happens if you don't live up to your moral responsibilities when you bring children into the world. So out of all these so-called leaders, the only one who's really telling the truth about all of this is Louis Farrakhan. Too bad about the anti-Semitism and the other stuff in his message, but at least he's talking about live up to your moral responsibility and abide with those values.
And he talks about don't count on the government, be independent, don't drink, don't smoke,
no
don't
affirmative
do drugs,
action.
Take care of your family, be a
Absolutely.
father. I think that's good for any race, any person. Darryl Parks, what do you think the answer is?
Without question, Sean, I think the answer is one, the lack of economic opportunities in inner city Milwaukee. Number two, the educational system in inner city Milwaukee. It's obvious that this community needs some help on the ground. And I want to hear solutions from the local leaders as to what we do to change those communities. Maybe we should follow Donald Trump's advice and send education back to the states and local communities. It sounds like you're supporting Trump's idea. Well, no, I wouldn't say I'm supporting Trump. I'm supporting Hillary Clinton. And so I think that the solutions are on the ground here in that community.
And Hillary's supporting the same failed policies of Obama. James, we'll give you the last word.
Sean, you know, one of our guests is right. This is not an issue about Black Lives Matter. This has been going on in Milwaukee since the late 1960s. And what you're hearing are that people are putting their political agendas on top of the riot that took place in Milwaukee. What you have is, as Larry Elders was saying, you have a government that has subsidized a father not being in the home. And what you're seeing is after decades of that, you have children who are angry, who are misguided, adults who are angry and misguided. There's been 2 full generations of this. And what you're seeing is those progressive policies coming home to roost. The answer is not in government. The answer is going to be in the very communities that are under this type of pressure. Wow. But they have to get it themselves. Otherwise, it just really won't count, will it?
All right, James and Larry, you guys are right. Daryl, unfortunately, you're usually wrong, but I still like you personally a lot. All right, thank you all for being with us. Important issues here. And coming up, we have reaction to Donald Trump's big speech from earlier today. Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North, he joins us as we continue from Milwaukee. By the way, if you want to be part of our town hall tomorrow night, right here in the Pabst Theater with Donald Trump, just go to my website, Hannity.com. It's the only place you can get tickets and find out how you can join us. That's tomorrow. Governor Walker, Donald Trump, and, yes, Sheriff David Clarke. We'll continue.
Not condemn the hatred, oppression, and violence of radical Islam lacks the moral clarity to serve as our president.
Well said. More from Donald Trump's foreign policy address earlier today. Joining us now, the host of War Stories, Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North. Colonel, he laid out the failures. He laid out the danger, the assessment of the real nature of evil in our time, and he offered a different path. Your reaction to this, and will he ever get any media coverage for substance? Because so far, the media is obsessed with everything else.
Sure. Look, I love the title, How to Destroy the Barbarians. It was spot on. I gave it an A. And best of all, he identified the enemy, clearly. He put the blame where it belongs for the genocide in the Middle East, the Libyan fiasco, the greatest refugee catastrophe since World War II, and now radical Islamist operational in 28 to 30 countries. I also liked his three-point plan for what he's going to do as president to end this madness. Number one, stand with any nation that stands with us. And he mentions by name Israel, Jordan, Egypt. He commended NATO for reorganizing to combat radical Islamic terror and said he was going to try to find common ground with Russia in the fight against ISIS. Second major point, he wants joint and coalition military and intelligence operations to eliminate radical Islamic safe havens, cut off funding, including the Iran-backed Hamas and Hezbollah. That's a quote. He wants cyber warfare and psychological operations to disable their recruiting and their propaganda. And he says you cannot allow the internet to be used as a recruiting tool. He's not going to announce what our military will or won't do beforehand. That's got to drive them nuts at the White House, because that's all they do. He's going to keep Gitmo open and capture, not just kill, terror leaders. He's going to collect intelligence to prosecute enemy combatants and try them in military tribunals. And third, he's going to protect the homeland. He's going to secure our borders, establish a new immigration screening process. He's only going to admit into the United States those who share our values and will say the U.S. Constitution is the law of the land, not Sharia. He called it extreme vetting. He's going to suspend immigration from countries that support terrorism, stop issuing visas until adequate screening procedures are in place. In the Cold War, Sean, we had a question that was asked. Are you now or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party in whatever country you're coming from? And if the answer was yes, they went back for more vetting. They didn't just wander around America. He wants a commission to develop those new protocols for law enforcement, Homeland Security, and immigration officers. His mission, as he said it, shut down radical Islamic terror support and networks here and overseas. And he wants to promote the virtues of our exceptional way of life. It's magnificent. What more can they want?
It's everything I believe we should be doing, and even more, and take the oil. I agreed with that, too. But here's the question. There are some Republicans that are openly sabotaging Donald Trump. And I say, if Hillary were to win, I'm blaming them. And that means people at National Review and the Weekly Standard and a lot of congressmen and senators and former presidential candidates. And I'm listening, Trump on the justices he'd appoint, immigration, ISIS, Obamacare. What do you say to them in the 30 seconds we have left?
You know what? If you're a critic of what this man just proposed, then you don't belong in a voting process. Critics are already pointing to his, quote, evolving positions. I heard that just an hour before I came on air with you. You know what we used to call evolving positions? We used to call that wisdom. I was very impressed with that stand that he took today.
And what do Marines do? Don't they adapt?
Well, right? And overcome. Adapt and overcome. You got it.
Right.
All right,
he's
Colonel, doing it.
Safe home.
Semper Fi, buddy.
Appreciate it. Appreciate you. And coming up, quick programming note. Tune in this Sunday for War Stories starting at 8 p.m. Eastern on our sister network, the Fox Business Network. When we come back, more Hannity right here from Milwaukee. Straight ahead.